Hello and welcome to our online reflection for this week here on Liberton Kirk Online. It's lovely to be with you and I hope you're keeping warm inside your own homes. Today, this week, we're going to be looking into one of David's famous Psalms and it looks into the Good Shepherd. I'm sure that many of us have heard it all before, but I want to focus on one particular verse for a key focus this week. And it talks about the comfort that we can receive from God, not from a distance, but rather when He walks beside us. And so I'm going to read from Psalm 23, and it's a Psalm of David, and it's from verse 4. So Psalm 23, verse 4, and it says this: Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. This psalm in particular hits at the very core of what it means to live a life with God. And I think it comes as no surprise that our lives will face many moments where it can become quite challenging, quite difficult. Here's a question I sometimes get asked whenever people realize that I'm a Christian. Oh, so you are a Christian. Life must feel very easy for you then. Now, in that moment, you could probably imagine that I would get quite riled up by that question, and I'm sure that I am not the only one. But perhaps actually, my own first instinct is actually to take a step back and truly reflect on what they are asking. And what I realize is this, that their assumption reveals just this misunderstanding of what faith truly is. That following God does not remove hardship, but reshapes how we walk through it. Faith does not promise an easy life. It promises a faithful presence in the midst of life, as it truly is for us. And so when we look at the Good Shepherd Psalm, David writes this psalm in his latter years. And you can imagine that throughout this time, he has had some time to reflect on his own life, both in the moments of great joy, but also in the moments that have been quite dark. And when David writes this infamous psalm about the Lord being the Good Shepherd in his life, he is simply not just talking about himself, but rather is actually speaking directly with God. And it begins with this nice, serene image of a glorious pasture with loads of blades of green grass, and there is peace that is in the air. But then the psalm quickly transitions to one that is the total opposite of that. The calm of the open fields gives way to the shadowed valley, a place of danger, uncertainty, and fear, where the path is narrow and the future remains unclear. Well, despite the gloominess of this horizon, David focuses his attention and indeed hears the voice of God right beside him as he goes on to describe the comfort that he receives when he travels alongside the Good Shepherd. And this comfort that he has within himself is so much more than just receiving peace, but rather this comfort becomes something that will enable him to fear no evil that appears before him. And then there goes on this description of what the shepherd will carry, even in his own hand: a rod, a staff. And this was not an uncommon tool that was used by shepherds in the ancient world, as they would be used to manage their flocks when the terrain becomes harsh and unpredictable. And come to think of it, we see this image of a rod and staff that is littered throughout the Old Testament. For example, Moses leading the Israelites back to the promised land from Egypt. That very staff that he was carrying would have the power to even split the waters apart and to help the Israelites travel to a new direction. And that staff would become a visual indication of where they needed to go. And so when we reflect on the Good Shepherd, we come to this powerful reminder. God created all of us not just to travel on our own walk in difficult circumstances. More so, God did not even just create all of us to live a life that is separated from Him. But this powerful imagery that David speaks of helps us to keep one thing that keeps in the back of our mind. The Christian walk, and indeed the way of faith itself, is not a great escape from all the difficulties that can come our way. But faith is the marker and the route of what it means when we walk beside a God that desires to guide us, to protect us, and to love us so dearly from such a close distance. In the valleys that we are currently facing, whose voice are we truly listening to? That voice of fear that surrounds us? Or the steady voice of the shepherd who says, I am with you every step of the way? May we go out into the world, realizing that the Good Shepherd does not stand from a distance, that he desires that he will guide us every step of the way. Let us once again hear his voice and to be guided by his rod and his staff, something that may look like uncomfortable, hooking onto the sheep, but rather becomes that source of comfort in order to guide us with what difficulties can be before us. The Good Shepherd, he's not just for some, but he's for each and every one of us. The question then becomes, do we hear his voice once more? And do we allow ourselves to open our spirits and our hearts to be guided by him so that we can continue a walkway, a pathway that he has planted before us, the Christian way that helps us guide through even the darkest of evil, to go to where there is always good. God bless you. May the Good Shepherd be with you always. And until next time, take care and God bless.